Hey guys, Hidden Truths here. Welcome to this new video with a bunch of new stories. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers and I think we can do it with your help. So please subscribe. It would honestly mean a lot to me. Now, let's get right into the stories. The telegram arrived on a rain-sodden Wednesday, just after I had convinced myself that nothing in my past could still lay claim to me. It was brief. Marcus Hale dead, house bequeathed, solicitor awaiting instructions. But the weight of those clipped syllables pressed harder than any storm cloud. For years I had rehearsed the certainty that Marcus and I were finished with each other. Nothing left but the dwindling afterscent of rivalry and a silence we both pretended was peace. And now, abruptly, he was summoning me home. Or is it guilt that summons me? The thought flared like matchlight, then dissolved into the damp hallway as I packed an overnight bag I hoped would not have to serve longer. I reached Gorswell 2 nights later, driving the last miles along a coast road hemmed by wind-shredded gorse and luminous dunes. Marcus's cottage perched above the tide line, whitewashed stone streaked with salt, slanted as if it leaned perpetually toward the sea's whisper. The key fit the lock reluctantly. Hinges answered with a groan that sounded eerily like complaint. Inside, the familiar smell of kelp and dust wrapped around me. Everything was as I remembered from our student holidays. Warped oak floor, low rafters nicotine dark, the iron stove that once boiled up our naive ambitions. Yet a thin film of neglect hovered, as though Marcus had inhabited these rooms only half a breath at a time. I set my bag by the staircase and walked room to room, turning on lamps that buzzed awake with sepia light. In the kitchen, I found a single coffee cup in the sink, flecked with grounds. Beside it, the kettle, still half full. He made coffee the morning he died, I thought, and never rinsed the bitterness away. The image clung like sediment. Upstairs, the small bedroom smelled of cedar chips and salt-dried linen. On the bedside table lay a notebook, its cover the color of storm clouds. I hesitated, palm hovering. Marcus had guarded his words fiercely once, after I teased him about scribbling cliches. He spent a week refusing to speak more than yes or no. But he was beyond wounded pride now. "You owe me answers," I murmured, flipping to the first page. The handwriting shocked me. Leaning, frantic, as though the ink itself were trying to outrun something. Last entry dated 3 days earlier. "He's coming." Can't silence the ticking anymore. Adrian will know. He always knew. If not, God forgive me. The rest of the page dissolved into water-stained blotches. My name stared up, accusatory. A draft prowled the corridor behind me. The open notebook shivered like a living thing. I closed it carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket, spine warm against my ribs. Then I noticed the silence. No gulls, no wind rattling the sash, only the hush of a house holding its breath. A memory surfaced. Marcus at 19, insisting every place possessed a pulse if one stilled oneself long enough. Back then I laughed, claiming science left no room for superstition. Now, with night pressing the windows, I could almost feel the floorboards tremble under an unseen heartbeat. Downstairs, again, I explored the study, a cramped nook off the sitting room. Shelves sagged with notebooks identical to the one upstairs, their spines numbered in white ink. 26 volumes. I traced a finger across them, dust lifting like ghost powder. All locked, a tiny brass latch on each. The key, of course, was nowhere to be seen. Across the study stood a second door I did not remember. Its paint was newer, the knob an old-fashioned glass orb that caught lamplight and fractured it into cold rainbows. I tried the handle. Locked. I knocked. Absurd, but reflexive. The sound echoed dully, and from beyond the timber a rhythmic clicking answered, faint yet deliberate, as though some mechanism kept count of seconds in a language just out of reach. Ticking. Marcus's note flooded back. A shiver stepped the length of my spine. I searched drawers, window ledges, even the dusty vase on the mantel for a key. Nothing. Beneath the desk blotter I did, however, find an envelope addressed in the same hurried script. For Adrian. When he is ready. No stamp, no seal. I slid a thumb under the flap. Inside lay a single Polaroid photograph and, folded twice, a coastal ordnance map. The Polaroid showed Marcus standing on the beach at low tide, trousers rolled, holding something small and black in his palm. His eyes were turned not to the camera, but toward the horizon, expression caught between wonder and dread. I squinted, trying to discern the object. It might have been a stone, or a pocket watch, or impossible to tell. The picture's grain swallowed details. The map bore only one mark, a crimson X drawn offshore, roughly where the seabed drops into the old quarry sinkhole the locals call Devil's Mouth. I had dived there once with Marcus, chasing rumors of petrified forest remains. The currents were vicious, visibility treacherous. We surfaced shaken, and sheathed the day in bravado. Now the red X felt less like an invitation than a warning. I folded the map, slid the photograph back into its envelope, and slipped both inside my jacket with the notebook. The ticking behind the locked door grew louder, or perhaps the house simply settled, boards creaking in time with my pulse. Either way, the hairs on my arms rose. I told myself I would fetch a screwdriver from the car and pry the latch. Old timber posed no threat. Yet I lingered, listening, until the porch light fizzed and went dark, plunging the cottage into a twilight that the single lamp barely dented. Enough. I stepped into the hallway and froze. A fresh footprint gleamed on the floorboards, water dark, leading from the front door toward the locked study. The air smelled suddenly of kelp and wet sand, as though someone had just come in from the shore. I had not left the door unlatched. A second smaller print appeared beside the first, blooming as if pressed by an invisible weight. Then another. I backed away, heart hammering until my shoulder hit the staircase newel. The prints advanced, steady, unhurried, stopping at the glass-knobbed door. The latch clicked. The door began to open. The door shuddered open no more than an inch, yet cold air spilled through the gap and nosed across my ankles with the insistence of a feral cat. I glimpsed nothing but darkness beyond, though the ticking grew distinct, metallic, irregular, as though a clock with a failing heart protested each second it managed to birth. My breath leaked in ragged plumes. Move! I commanded myself, though every tendon resisted. I edged forward until my fingertips grazed the glass knob. The footprints had stopped. No further impressions marked the boards. Whatever agency had opened the door seemed content to let me finish the deed. I swung the panel wider. A single bulb dangled from the ceiling of a windowless cubby, scarcely large enough for two men to stand shoulder to shoulder. Under its jaundiced glow sat a work table, littered with brass gears, shards of shell, and coils of frayed copper wire. At the center perched a black pocket watch, lid prized off, entrails splayed like a dissected beetle. Its hands stuttered between seconds, then lunged forward, issuing the uneven ticks that had summoned me. Pinned to the wall behind the table was an arrangement of Polaroids. Dozens, overlapping like dragonfly wings. Each showed Marcus on the same storm-polished strand, every shot capturing a subtly different moment. Marcus kneeling, Marcus ankle-deep, Marcus lifting the watch toward the lens. Under every photo he had scrawled a time of day and a single word. Surfaced, stilled, reversed, cracked. The progression ended with one final image slightly apart from the hive. In it, Marcus stood waist-high in foam, mouth open as if yelling, the watch submerged halfway beneath the waterline. Beneath, he had written nothing but the number 0. A faint dizziness pressed my temples. How many mornings had he returned to that beach repeating some private ritual? What boundary had he sought to breach? On the table lay a second notebook, smaller than the volumes outside, pages torn and smudged. I turned to the last entry. If he reads this, tell him the watch does not belong to us. Time circles here, never forward. I blurred the loop, but the sea remembers every intention. My pulse thudded, loud enough to mask the watch's stammering cadence. Time circles. Old conversations with Marcus whispered back. His fascination with paradox, the half-serious theory that certain stretches of coastline owned a memory independent of ours. I had dismissed it as feverish creativity and teased him for scripting pseudoscience. Now the artifacts before me felt less like props than evidence. Something shifted behind me, a hush of fabric against plaster. I spun. The door had swung shut. The knob quivered, then stilled. Empty. Yet a salt-wet scent pooled thickly, as if someone had stood there moments before. I lunged, yanked the door wide, and found the hallway vacant, save for the smeared footprints fading into nothing. Enough of haunted corridors and cryptic ephemera. I needed human context, records, witnesses, an anchor outside the house's claustrophobic paranoia. Locking the study behind me, I grabbed the car keys, shrugged on my jacket, and stepped into the night. Rain had ceased, leaving air so clear the Milky Way gleamed like chalk dust spilled across slate. The sea mumbled below, too calm for the hour. I climbed into the car and drove toward the village 2 miles inland, tires hissing over rain-slick tarmac. The Dog and Lantern still served as Gorswell's only pub, a low-eaved building whose whitening sign gave the Mastiff an almost benign grin. Inside, yellow lamplight, the yeasty breath of ale, and a smattering of locals hunched over tables gave an illusion of ordinary life I desperately needed. I ordered a coffee that arrived black and scalding, then asked the barkeep, an aging man with eyebrows like frostbitten ferns, when he had last seen Marcus Hale. He eyed me, recognition blooming. "You were his mate from college, Adrian, wasn't it?" I nodded. "Marcus came in near every evening this past month?" he said, voice low to keep from pricking neighboring ears. Drank 1 pint, sat by the window, stared at the tide, never brought the glass to his lips, not once. I asked whether Marcus had spoken of a watch or the Devil's Mouth sinkhole. The barkeep frowned. He did ask if any diver I knew could manage peculiar hours. Said he needed someone to go down at Slackwater precisely 4:33 a.m., no sooner, no later. An uneasy chuckle. Told him divers like sleep as much as lungs, so he left without hiring. A woman at the bar, gray hair scraped into a bun, leaned over. "Saw him the night before he died," she murmured. "Looked as if he'd stepped out of a freezer. Clothes soaked, lips blue, hand clenched round something too tightly to glimpse, kept whispering 'reset, reset' under his breath." The barkeep added, "Found washed up next morning. No obvious wounds. Doctor said heart gave out." Heart failure at 37? My own heart hammered in rebuttal. I thanked them, finished the coffee despite its bitterness, and returned to the car with a resolve sharp as the night air. Marcus wanted me to understand the watch, the loop, the mouth of the sea. If answers waited anywhere, they lurked beneath that black water. Back at the cottage, I studied the tide tables mounted by the pantry door. Low tide tomorrow would peak at 4:25 a.m., frighteningly close to the hour Marcus had fixated on. I laid out my old diving gear, testing regulators, inspecting O-rings, forcing calm upon fingers that trembled. At 3:30, I would hike the narrow cliff path to the beach, row the dinghy to the sinkhole's coordinates, and descend. Practical steps anchored the rising dread. Yet as I zipped the final duffel, a knock reverberated from the front porch. 3 measured taps, a pause, then 3 more. I froze, glancing at the hallway clock. Past midnight, all village lights extinguished, only the sea kept watch. The knock repeated, not louder but nearer. as though the sound itself crept through the wood. "Don't open it," reason warned. But the house, with its notebooks and ticking relic, had already beckoned me this far. I crossed the sitting room, hand outstretched to the latch. The porch lamp flickered alive of its own accord, exposing a figure standing motionless beyond the glass. Rain-slick hair clung to a face both familiar and wrong. Marcus, yet pallid, eyes rimmed in night shadow, seawater dripping from his collar. His right hand cradled the black pocket watch, lid shut. The second hand on its glazed face spun backward in a blur. His lips moved. I heard no sound, but the syllables wrote themselves across the glassy divide. "Help me." The watch in his palm clicked once, twice, and the porch lamp died, erasing him into darkness. I yanked the door open. Wind rushed in, rank with brine, but the porch stood empty save for a widening puddle that traced two receding footsteps down the stairs toward the invisible shore. Somewhere below, the sea exhaled, and I knew dawn would not wait for my courage. "I will dive," I vowed, though the words tasted like farewell more than intent. The alarm chimed at 3:15. Though I had not truly slept, I rose from a half-dream in which the sea kept whispering my name in Marcus's voice. Outside, the sky retained a bruised indigo, and the cottage windows glimmered faintly with reflected starlight. I dressed in layers, thermal undersuit, neoprene hood, each piece tugged over skin clammy with anticipation. When I latched the final buckle, the suit's snugness felt less like protection than a shroud. Yet I pushed the notion aside. Get through the procedure. Speculate later. The dinghy waited on the pebble spit below the bluff, exactly where Marcus and I had once left it after a reckless moonlit fishing trip. The tide was almost fully ebbed, exposing slick ribbons of kelp that glowed silvery in the half-moon. I heaved the tank, weights, and a waterproof torch aboard, then slid the little craft seaward, oars squealing in worn locks. Each pull drew me farther from the comforting muddle of land smells into a realm of salt and faint iodine, where even my breathing felt borrowed. Halfway to the coordinates, the first chill breeze arrived, carrying the sour tang of distant marshes. Stars puddled on the water's surface, shivering whenever the dinghy's prow nudged them aside. I tried not to imagine Marcus's footsteps pacing some invisible catwalk beneath. Instead, I recalled basic safety lists. Check pressure gauge, secure tether line, confirm knife placement. Recitation steadied my pulse until the handheld depth finder pinged 4 fathoms beneath, and the compass needle quivered onto the heading Marcus had marked with that admonitory red X. I let the anchor slide, rope hissing through frozen fingers, until it struck silt with a faint tug. The sinkhole's throat gaped black below, yet the surrounding water remained glassy, as though the sea itself recoiled from that particular void. I fixed a strobe to the dinghy's gunwale, set a timer on my wrist computer, and spat into my mask. Control the dive, control the fear, I reminded myself while biting down on the regulator mouthpiece. The moment my body broke the surface, the world sealed behind a skin of pressure and muffled thrumming. Cold stunned my cheeks, but the suit held. I deflated the buoyancy vest and allowed gravity to tug me into the hush, torch beam knifing ahead. Silt particles drifted like powdered bone. Somewhere above, dawn's first hint would be amber. Yet here, everything remained dusk. At 8 meters, I met the lip of the sinkhole. Beyond, water thickened into a column of darker ink. I tapped the depth gauge, still within human tolerance, and advanced, equalizing my ears against the gathering weight. Ticking reached me, faint yet distinct, as if transmitted through the bones of the ocean. I told myself it was imagination, but the rhythm aligned too perfectly with Marcus's broken watch for coincidence. Shelves of rock angled inward, funneling me deeper until the torch glow caught metallic glints scattered across ledges. I cupped one, a brass gear no larger than a fingernail, its teeth chewed smooth by corrosion. Another, shelf, held the fractured faceplate of a pocket watch, Roman numerals half erased. Dozens more pieces lay strewn like breadcrumbs on a trail devised by a mad horologist. How many watches did he drown in pursuit of whatever law he meant to rewrite? At 22 meters, the funnel opened unexpectedly into a cavern, roof lost in gloom. A forest of rusted chains dangled from that invisible ceiling, each ending in a lead weight or a manacle slick with algae. They swayed gently, but no current brushed my suit, a disconcerting contradiction that made my scalp prickle. I threaded between them, careful not to snag hoses, and shone the torch across the far wall. An archway emerged, impossibly angular, its masonry too smooth for quarry debris. Symbols etched along the keystone resembled fractured hourglasses. The sand arrested midway. Beneath the arch hung another watch, this one intact, suspended by a single chain link. Its hands spun backward so fast the blur became a silver halo. I reached toward it, and the water around my glove vibrated, as if sound condensed into texture. The tick-tick-tick thickened, slowing, until I felt rather than heard each click. Inside the arch, darkness churned, more opaque than mere absence of light. My torch beam seemed to bend away from it. I hesitated, lungs reminding me they needed rhythm. Collect evidence, surface, reassess. Yet a pale flicker breathed within the churn, forming the outline of a man. He leaned, palms braced on invisible glass, mouth shaping words I could not hear. Marcus. His eyes widened, recognition flaring like phosphorescence. He lifted his own wrist, displaying a watch identical to the one overhead, but its hands were motionless. He pressed a finger to the glass between us, if glass existed, and then jabbed urgently toward me, making a circular motion, repeating it until the gesture blurred. I understood with a shock. Turn back, break the loop. Before I could offer answer, a force clamped my right ankle. Instinct whirled me around. Another chain had wrapped itself, impossible but true, links creaking through no current swung them. I slashed with the dive knife. Steel bit, algae-softened iron, freed me halfway. The chain recoiled like a living eel and caught my wrist this time, jerking me toward the cavern floor. Silt geysered upward, torch spinning from my grip. Darkness swallowed the beam, leaving only faint strobe flicker from the distant dinghy above, a cold star receding. I kicked hard, but the chain wheeled, dragging me beneath the arch. Edges of masonry blurred. The water within felt thicker, almost gelatinous. My computer alarm screamed depth ascent warning, yet the numbers made no sense. They cycled downward, 22 meter 18 meter 14 am, though I sank. The watch overhead emitted a single chime, resonant as cathedral bronze, and every chain in the cavern shivered, shedding rust clouds that glittered like embers. Impossible. The lone word fired through my skull, my allowance spent. But terror needed no grammar. I rammed the knife against the cuff. Sparks of metal on metal, blooming, luminous green. The link split. Momentum hurled me backward out of the arch's threshold. Time recoiled to normal density. The ticking retreated. I hovered, chest heaving against the regulator while silt snowed around me. Marcus's figure still pressed the dark pane, but cracks spiderwebbed across the boundary now. For an instant, his face softened. Relief, perhaps. Then the pane shattered inward, and the cavity behind him yawned like a mouth too ancient to name. Water convulsed, sucking him inside until even his outstretched hand vanished. A thunderous pulse rippled outward, slamming me against the cavern wall. Pain flared along my shoulder. Rocks above groaned, shedding pebbles. If the roof collapsed, I would never surface. I kicked upward, following the faint gray corridor back to the sinkhole's throat, yet every stroke felt resisted, as though the sea argued over ownership of my body. Depth gauge still spiraled, digits chasing themselves backward. Light bloomed ahead. Reddish, pulsing, wrong. The sinkhole's rim glowed as if iron heated from within. Silhouetted against that glow floated a second diver, profile unmistakably my own. Same gear. Same lank hair drifting like weed. He raised his mask. Beneath, his eyes were hollow sockets where seawater churned. He beckoned, palm twisting in an invitation so final it felt like fate sealed. For a heartbeat, paralysis claimed me. Then I triggered the emergency ascent bladder. Helium hissed, vest ballooned, torque wrenching my shoulders. The double faded below. I clawed toward the strobing pinprick of the dinghy, mind repeating a single prayer to any deity governing fractured hours. Just as my head broke surface, dawn split the horizon blood orange, and behind me, something colossal sighed through the waves, retreating, but not defeated. A shape breached briefly, the arch's keystone rising like a fin before the water swallowed it again, leaving only widening ripples and the conviction that loops, once opened, seldom agree to close. I gasped brine-tainted air, dimly aware that the cottage lights had flared to life on the bluff, though no hand remained to switch them on. And from that empty shore carried a voice not quite my own, repeating a single command. "Return!" The word merged with the crash of breakers, yet its intent lay crystal clear and promised no mercy for refusal. I hauled myself into the dinghy like a half-drowned animal, limbs trembling with exhaustion and a ragged disbelief that the sky still held its ordinary hues. The strobe winked behind me, its rhythm discordant after the cavern's monstrous pulse, and the anchor rope traced a gentle catenary into water that suddenly looked no deeper than glass. I wanted nothing more than to row for shore, crawl to the cottage, and barricade every door. Yet curiosity, poison masked as duty, dragged my gaze back to the sinkhole. The surface lay smooth, flawless, as if nothing had disturbed it. Not a single brass gear bobbed up to testify that I had not hallucinated the chain forest or Marcus's pleading silhouette. Evidence, my mind insisted. Without it, madness would become the simplest explanation, and I could not afford simplicity. I leaned over the gunwale, dipped my hand, and felt around blindly. Something cold knocked my knuckles. I fished it out. A watch. Not the cracked relic from the cavern, but whole. Its lid engraved with concentric circles. Water sheets slid from its case. Inside, the second hand spasmed, ticking forward, then back, then forward again. I almost hurled it into the waves. Instead, I pocketed it, knotting the zipper shut as though that flimsy fabric could contain temporal treachery. Rowing back, I noticed how color drained from the scenery as dawn advanced. The cliffs, once ochre, flattened into monochrome. Gulls wheeled silently, beaks opening without sound, a pantomime of living film stripped of audio. Only the oarlock's squeal remained, a thin thread anchoring me to tactile reality. When the dinghy kissed shingle, the cottage lights extinguished, returning the bluff to its customary gloom. I dragged the craft above the tide line, then trudged upward, tank banging against my thigh like a reprimand. Inside, warmth clung to the kitchen, though the stove was dead cold. On the table sat a mug of coffee, steaming lazily, as though prepared moments earlier. My wet gloves left prints beside it. A note lay beneath the mug, ink still glossy. "Drink while it's hot. You'll need the daylight, no signature." The steam smelled faintly of cardamom, a spice Marcus and I used to argue about. He loved its perfumed sharpness. I found it cloying. Goose flesh prickled my arms. I poured the coffee into the sink where it swirled like dark blood before vanishing. I emptied my pockets onto the worktop. The recovered watch, the map, the Polaroid, Marcus's frantic notebook. Watergate dripped from each. I unfurled the map. The red X had bled outward, staining neighboring grid lines like a bruise. Beneath it, a second symbol had bloomed. 2 concentric circles crossed by a diagonal slash identical to the engraving on the watch lid. Not drawn by my hand, I thought, yet fresh ink glistened. Exhaustion gnawed, but adrenaline kept me upright. I lit the sitting room fire, hoping flame's primitive insistence might drown subtler rhythms, yet the watch ticked on. Syncopated, percussive. I set it on the mantel. Immediately, the minute hand leapt backward 3 notches, then forward 2, as if calibrating some unseen metronome. The pendulumless watch governed the room. Each rasp of the log felt syncopated to its stutter. I grabbed Marcus's notebook, skipping pages of calculus-like scrawl until a diagram caught my eye. 3 overlapping loops labeled Adrian 1, Adrian 2, Adrian 3. Beneath, his cramped commentary, "The mouth does not consume, it mirrors." Reflection breeds persistence. If iteration fails, collapse is inevitable. The next page recorded dates July 23rd, 24th, 25, today. Each followed by cryptic annotations. Retrieved watch, returned after 4:33. Outcome unresolved. My stomach clenched. I had just enacted today's entry without knowing. A floorboard creaked overhead. I glanced at the hallway clock. 6:02 a.m., too early for visitors, too late for phantoms spawned by midnight. I mounted the steps, each tread complaining under my damp boots. Marcus's bedroom door stood ajar. Within, the chill bit sharper. Bed sheets were pulled back, pillow dented as though someone had risen minutes before. On the windowsill rested another notebook, smaller, bound with twine. I opened it. To Adrian, whichever iteration reaches this, if you can read, you escaped the first fail state. The watch you carry is the anchor. Smash it in daylight or the loop resets at sundown. Do not attempt to bury or drown it. Water only strengthens the echo. Fire may work, but risks cascade. Best method: fracture glass beneath mirrorless sky. No clouds, no standing water. After rupture, remain awake until midnight. Sleep invites recursion. My pulse flickered in my throat. Outside, sunlight pushed through thinning fog, unveiling a sky scrubbed clean. Exactly mirrorless. I headed downstairs, seized the watch, and stepped onto the porch. The horizon shone steel blue. Tide crept in sluggishly, licking rocks like a beast tasting boundaries. I walked toward the cliff edge where lichened granite provided firm footing. One strike against stone, and the watch's lid dented. A second blow cracked the crystal. Fractures spidered across the face, and the erratic tick sputtered. I raised my arm for a final swing. A voice behind me, breathless, urgent, spoke my name. I wheeled. 30 paces away, standing at the gate, was myself, jersey torn, hair matted with salt. His left arm dangled at an impossible angle. His eyes, wide with pleading, locked onto the watch in my fist. "Don't!" he yelled, yet the word emerged muffled, as though filtered through heavy glass. He stumbled forward, collapsing to one knee. Blood darkened his cuff. Shock halted my hand mid-arc. 2 versions of me could not occupy one shoreline, some rule deep as physics insisted so. He raised his good hand, palm out, begging. I lowered the stone a fraction. Indecision, roiling. Which one of us belongs to this timeline? The question itself courted madness. He spoke again, syllables fragmenting. Break, ends, all. Was he warning or pleading? His eyes glimmered with raw panic. Beneath my thumb, the fractured watch resumed ticking, faster now, frantic. Each click vibrated my bones, as though alignment approached a terminal moment. A gust punched the cliff, hurling salt spray between us. When it cleared, the second Adrian flickered, image losing cohesion, like a film frame detaching from sprockets. He extended his broken arm. Bones ground audibly, yet he crawled nearer, leaving a smear of blood on the granite. In that instant, clarity sliced through turmoil. If loops spawn versions, hesitating feeds multiplication. Action cuts the strand. I gripped the watch, felt glass bite skin, and slammed it against the boulder. The casing burst open, gears and springs flew like startled insects. A single chime, pure, bell-like, rang through the air, then snuffed into silence. The crawling figure froze, eyes wide, body trembling as if resisting dissolution. His outline wavered, gaining transparency. He opened his mouth. No sound emerged. Slowly, particle by particle, he scattered on the wind until only the blood smear remained to attest he had ever existed. I staggered back, heart a maelstrom, fists stinging. The ruined watch lay gutted, hands splayed at 4:10, meaningless now. Yet the wind changed. It carried not sea salt, but the dry scent of heather in bloom. Waves crashed with the ordinary cadence of physics obedient to tide. Relief flooded me, premature and fragile. From the cottage stairwell, a faint ticking echoed. Impossible, after I had destroyed the anchor. I turned, dread coiling anew. The noise grew louder, resolving into a familiar, uneven rhythm. Another watch awaited inside. Or perhaps the same one, mended by operations that laughed at causality. I realized the notebook's warning had a second clause. Remain awake until midnight. My eyelids felt leaden. Exhaustion crouched ready to ambush willpower. If sleep birthed recursion, then the cottage with its beds and hush had become a trap. I clenched my fists, steeled resolve, and stepped toward the threshold, past which the ticking beckoned like a metronome, measuring the distance between salvation and surrender. The hallway swallowed me as soon as I crossed the threshold. Behind, daylight dulled to pewter, trapping the cliff's heather scent outside like a memory already fading. The ticking pulsed from the study, neither louder nor faster than before, yet every strike struck nerve rather than air. I forced measured breaths. 5 seconds in, 5 out, while passing the sitting room mantel where the shattered watch still lay gutted. Its silence mocked whatever new mechanism had dared replace it. Inside the study, the door with the glass knob now stood fully open. Lamplight cast a wan ellipse across the work table, illuminating a fresh watch gleaming atop Marcus's scattered gears. This model differed. Silver casing, ivory face, Roman numerals pristine. The second hand described a perfect backward circle, each click crisp as frost. I stared, unwilling to touch it. Break one anchor, another grows. The cottage itself seemed a hive for chronal parasites, each brood ready the instant its predecessor died. My eyes burned. Exhaustion prowled close, seducing with visions of blankets and the promise that nightmares end when consciousness dissolves. I clenched fists. Not yet, I muttered, voice grainy. The diary's edict rang. Remain awake until midnight. I checked my watch, ordinary digital, stubbornly linear, barely 9 a.m. 14 hours stretched ahead, a desert of time too wide to cross alone. Coffee, then. Industrial quantities. I retreated to the kitchen, lit the stove, and set water to boil. While the kettle hissed, I opened cupboard after cupboard hunting caffeine. All empty save one tin labeled Darjeeling. Marcus. I almost laughed. Tea would not preserve sanity. I turned to the pantry and found, inexplicably, the barkeep from the Dog and Lantern standing amid flour sacks, wiping his hands on a towel as though my larder were his rightful domain. His form blurred about the edges, haloed by dust motes. He smiled without warmth. You'll never keep your eyes open that long, son. I blinked hard. The pantry was vacant, only cobwebs swaying. My pulse jackhammered. Stay anchored. Hallucinations feed on fatigue. The kettle shrieked. I poured water, brewed thin coffee from grounds scavenged under the sink, and drank 2 scalding mugs in succession. The bitterness jolted nerves, but could not erase the barkeep's phantom voice ringing inside my skull like barroom clatter after closing. Hours dragged. I paced rooms, cheeks tingling each time another watch materialized, on the mantel, atop the refrigerator, even balanced on the banister newel. I smashed them methodically with fireplace tongs. Springs skittered like metallic crickets across floorboards. Yet the ticking never ceased. It simply shifted location, a fugitive heartbeat the house protected. Mid-afternoon sunlight seeped through stained glass, painting the hallway in bruised colors. I opened every window, inviting wind to scour stale air, but the gusts carried the faint chime of church bells where no church stood for miles. The sound twisted into Marcus's laughter, our younger selves racing tide pools, pockets stuffed with quartz pebbles we pretended were diamonds. Nostalgia pricked behind my eyes. I shook my head hard. Sentiment softens vigilance. By 5, the caffeine buzz devolved into tremors. My thoughts slipped sideways, catching on phrases Marcus once whispered about the sea's memory loops, how each wave mimicked its ancestor yet never truly matched. He had insisted patterns sought closure, the way unfinished melodies ache for resolution. I scoffed then. Now I marched to the sitting room, grabbed his numbered notebooks, and fed them to the fire. Pages curled, ink bubbled, and the air filled with the sweet, acrid odor of smoldering secrets. Flames roared higher than paper should permit, licking the flue in hungry tongues. When the final spine collapsed to ash, the room fell eerily still. No ticking, no chime. Only the soft collapse of coal. Relief sagged my shoulders, almost toppling me. Midnight is distant. Keep moving. I rummaged through the sideboard for distractions and discovered a handheld voice recorder, the cheap plastic kind we used during university fieldwork. Its red light blinked, battery somehow full. I pressed play. Static crackled, then my own voice emerged, slow and slurred. Test 61. Anchor failed. Divergence at 1930 hours. If you're hearing this, Adrian, remember the heather. It blooms only once. The recording ended. My knees weakened. I did not recall making any test, let alone 60 prior attempts. Yet the timbre was unmistakably mine. Wearier, haunted. The timestamp stamped yesterday's date. I smashed the recorder, yet shards continued emitting faint echoes of my spoken words until I swept them into the fire. Ash motes spiraled up the chimney like graying fireflies. Dusk approached, bleeding amber through the salt-encrusted panes. Fatigue pressed heavier, thickening my limbs as though gravity itself conspired. I brewed more coffee, hands shaking so violently, grounds scattered across the counter like gunpowder. As I wiped them, a low hum rose from the cellar door I had ignored until now. The handle twitched. Then silence. Curiosity and dread twined. The cellar had always stored fishing gear and surplus tinned soup, nothing worth haunting. Yet if the house spawned loops, perhaps the source nested beneath, where earth and sea blended. I fetched the heavy torch, pried the door open, and descended creaking steps that smelled of sodden bark. Halfway down, water lapped my boots. The cellar was flooding, ankle-deep seawater reflecting torchlight in shivering shoals. Nets floated like drowned veils, empty jars knocked together with polite clinks. At the center, atop an upturned crate, sat yet another watch. Unlike its predecessors, this one bore no hands, only a mirror polished to black. Instead of ticking, it breathed. A hush of intake, a hush of release, synchronized with the waves beyond the cliffs. I approached, mesmerized. My reflection wavered on the dark surface, splitting into duplicate selves with every ripple. Each phantom Adrian whispered different words, though sound perished under water's hush. I leaned closer, trying to read lips. The watch exhaled a cold gust that extinguished the torch. Pitch darkness swallowed everything. Water climbed to mid-calf with alarming speed, glacially cold, numbing. I lurched toward where the stairs should be. My shin struck wood, pain flowering. Balance failed and I plunged, mouth filling with brine. Disoriented, I thrashed until fingers located the first step. As I climbed, something tugged my ankle. Not chain this time, but a hand. Fingers clammy, yet undeniably human. Panic drove a kick that connected. The grip released. I burst into the hallway, dripping. Coughing seawater that shouldn't have tasted fresh yet, did. Behind me, the cellar door slammed of its own volition. Ticking resumed overhead, mocking. A mirror on the wall, previously covered in dust, now gleamed, displaying not the corridor but the flooded cellar, water rising past waist level. Within that frame floated a silhouette, head tilted back as though screaming beneath the surface. My eyes blurred. Consciousness frayed like rotted rope. If I sleep now, I may never wake as myself. I pressed palms over ears, crouched against the skirting board, and began reciting nonsense Latin I half remembered from choir days. The rhythm a desperate lullaby to keep brainwaves aloft. Footsteps creaked down the staircase, the deliberate weight of a single person descending. I lifted my gaze just as Marcus emerged, dry-clothed, eyes reflective as the mirror downstairs. He held a final watch, glassless, gearless, its hollow core pulsed with faint blue glow. He extended it toward me. "Time tires of our defiance," he said, voice calm as sermon. "One of us must surrender to end the echo. Decide before midnight." The hallway clock chimed once, its hands already circling backward. I looked from the glowing void in Marcus's palm to the mirror where water now kissed the ceiling, and I knew surrender might be the only currency time respected. Which of us it demanded, though, remained mercilessly unclear. The clock prepared its next chime. I inhaled, tasting the brackish air of the cellar on every breath. The moment of decision rushed toward me like an undertow intent on dragging thought itself away, and I had only heartbeats left to choose. Marcus's outstretched hand glimmered like a lantern lowered into black water, the watch shell in his palm pulsing with a blue that felt neither cold nor warm, but simply inevitable. I rose on shaking legs, wet clothes clinging, and the hallway seemed to lengthen, floorboards stretching until each step toward him resembled the slow progress of a dreamer wading through syrup. Behind Marcus, the study door yawned wider, spilling a tide of broken clock parts that clinked together, urging haste. Midnight crouched somewhere above the rafters, assembling gears for its final descent. "You ask me to surrender," I murmured, voice rusted from brine. "But which version of me matters to the loop?" Marcus tilted his head, gaze unreadable, and in his pupils tiny cogs revolved backward, measuring some private equation. He answered without moving lips, the words appearing fully formed in my mind. "The loop was seated the night you left me on that beach. You thought silence closed wounds, it only taught them to echo. Shame pierced sharper than seawater's chill. Years earlier I had mocked his obsession, driven inland, never answered another letter. Marcus studied tidal patterns. I studied promotions and conference flights, each mile curving us further apart. Now, consequence had returned, wearing his face. I reached toward the glowing watch. The nearer my fingers came, the more memories coalesced. Dawn light on wet sand, the heft of the original watch pressed into my pocket by Marcus, my careless promise to examine it later. I had forgotten that moment completely, but the loop had not. My fingertips brushed the shell. Images flooded. 100 Adrians smashing 100 watches. Each failure spawning fresh fractures in time's surface until the coastline resembled shattered ice. Marcus whispered aloud at last, his breath fanning the glow. "Time will claim whichever of us holds the origin. Let it be me." I almost surrendered the decision to fatigue, but the cellar mirror flashed, reminding me of the drowning silhouette, another me already paying some part of the debt. If I handed Marcus the absolution he wanted, perhaps the loop would tighten around every other version, crushing them like coal into diamond. Sacrifice chosen too hastily could merely multiply the cost. Wind sluiced through broken windows carrying distant surf and the faint toll of a bell. 11:48. I closed my hand around the watch. The moment I did, the hallway dissolved. Stars wheeled overhead, enormous and slow, while beneath my boots lay the beach, damp and moonlit as on the night of our final argument. Younger Marcus stood a few paces away, hair plastered to his forehead by spray, holding the first black watch. He thrust it toward me, pleading for help to listen to the sea's story. I remembered scoffing, turning away, pocketing the watch only to toss it into my suitcase later and forget. "Listen now," present Marcus urged beside me, though he seemed half-transparent here, as if memory could not fully host him. Younger Marcus spoke again, but his words overlapped with a grinding tick. The black watch rewinding itself faster and faster, dragging the scene with it. Sand reshaped, footprints reversed, moon slid west. I felt time's umbilical cord tug, trying to wrench me backward with everything else. Instinct screamed, "Anchor myself." I hurled the glowing shell toward the retreating moon. It arced, shedding cobalt sparks, then shattered mid-ski-eye. Silence slammed down. The rewind ceased. The beach froze, joined by present Marcus in sudden solidity. Younger Marcus blinked, confused by the stalled night, then stared at me as if seeing a ghost. Perhaps he did. Present Marcus slowly smiled, a gesture tinged with sorrow. "You found a third path." He stepped toward younger Marcus, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "He needs forgiveness, not loops." The two versions merged like watercolors, bleeding into one figure that flickered before settling into a single breathing Marcus. Alive, eyes clear of mechanical reflections. Relief surged so fiercely my knees buckled. But the sky above still trembled, stars flickering like faulty bulbs. Splinters from the shattered shell remained orbiting overhead, each tiny shard a potential seed for fresh paradox. One fragment drifted downward, spinning, and as it passed my ear, I heard the seller's drowned voice begging again. The loop's roots reached deeper than broken watches. They nested in every regret we failed to voice. Marcus knelt, scooped wet sand, and fashioned a small mound, pressing both hands into it. Tidal foam glossed the sculpture. Phosphorescence ignited along the ridges like veins of light. "Bury the regret," he whispered. "Seal it where tides can grind it honest." I copied him, cupping sand that felt peculiarly warm. Together we layered mound upon mound, encasing the splinters as they fell. With each handful, memories surfaced, then dissolved. Our laughter during late-night debates, my dismissive smirk when he first spoke of tidal memory, his silent tears on departure day. As sand swallowed the last shard, the mound pulsed once, then hardened to stone smoother than beach rock, bands of quartz spiraling its circumference like a clock with no face. Waves advanced, reached the stone, hesitated, then flowed around it as though acknowledging a boundary newly drawn. The star glitch faded. Constellations steadied. I exhaled a breath I felt I had held for years. Yet balance seldom returns without a price. From the dune path behind us came footsteps crunching gravel. I turned, expecting perhaps another version of myself. Instead, the figure belonged to no memory. A woman. Hair white as surf under starlight, clad in a cloak woven from midnight blue. In her hand dangled a pocket watch crafted from translucent crystal, inside which miniature tides ebbed and flowed. She regarded the stone a moment, then me. "A loop unraveled leaves a frayed edge," she said, voice like wind between cliff fissures. "Someone must weave the severing into history, lest time tear wider." I stood rooted, words lost. Marcus straightened, sand dripping from his fingers. "Who are you?" he asked. "A caretaker," she replied, stepping closer until the watch's aquatic light washed our faces. "One thread undone can free many, but it can also invite unraveling elsewhere. Which of you tends the new seam will decide the pattern that follows. Understanding dawned cruelly. We had closed one circle, yet the act birthed a vacancy, custodianship of the scar where Loop had lived. Acceptance would mean remaining tethered to this beach, guarding the quartz stone, ensuring regrets never resurrected. Refusal might let the wound gape, swallowing futures beyond count. Marcus met my gaze, apology and hope mingling. The caretaker extended her crystalline watch, pendulum already swinging, counting seconds we could not spare. 11:57. I swallowed, tasting salt and the metallic tang of choice, realizing the Loop's final demand was not surrender, but stewardship, and we had 3 heartbeats left to decide who would bear it. The caretaker's crystalline watch swung in a hush so profound it eclipsed the surf, each tick sounding like distant glass dogs barking beneath the moon. I felt the pull of its miniature tides, as if gravity itself had splintered into smaller, more intimate laws that cared nothing for planets and everything for remorse. Marcus breathed beside me, breath fogging the chill air in fragile blossoms that vanished before they rose. Choose now, the night seemed to whisper, before history begins rewriting itself without permission. I saw our 2 lives like ropes wound together yet fraying at different rates. Marcus possessed the restless faith of those who believe mysteries must be solved, catalogued, filed. I had spent my adulthood avoiding unfinished stories, numbing their echoes with busy agendas. Now the unfinished had cornered us on an empty strand, demanding closure that would echo through every yesterday we had tried to ignore. The sky, lately healed, revealed a faint aurora, veins of pale green unyoking from the pole, writhing like embryonic scribbles on black parchment. I wondered whether those lights were ordinary solar breath or fresh stitches where our loop once gnawed a hole. The caretaker watched them with an expression almost tender. She raised the crystal watch a fraction higher, its glow intensifying, as though coaxing truth to the surface. Marcus broke the silence first. His voice no longer carried that dissonant undertone of clockwork. It sounded tired and achingly human. "It should be me," he said, gaze fixed on the quartz stone we had birthed. "I started the tear. Let me finish the mend." The words stabbed because they were half true. I had abandoned him to obsession, dismissed the questions that festered until they found teeth. My inaction had been an action. Responsibility bowed my shoulders, yet hope stirred too. A hope that Marcus might finally walk inland, taste ordinary years unmarred by ticking dread. "No," I answered, and the monosyllable tasted of iron. "I left you alone when the loop began its first turn. Let me stand here now." I expected argument, but he merely studied me with eyes so clear they mirrored every crease of my face. Perhaps he saw the fear nestled among my resolve. Perhaps he forgave it. The caretaker stepped toward us, cloak trailing unlit constellations. "Once appointed," she murmured, "the steward endures until another willingly inherits. Time consents only to willing exchange." Her words fell like fine ash on still water, quiet, definite, already settling. She held out the crystal watch. I reached. Marcus grasped my wrist, a final plea sparking between fingers. His skin felt warm, alive, stubborn in its claim to the future. "You don't have to atone alone," he whispered. "We could share the post, alternate sunsets, draft shifts like lighthouse keepers." I almost smiled at the childish practicality, yet the caretaker gave a soft shake of her head. "Dual stewardship fractures intent," she said. "One heart, one memory, one sentinel." The aurora brightened, scales of serpents turning just beneath night's skin, as if impatience gathered. Marcus's grip loosened. He stepped back 3 paces, stopped before the quartz stone, and laid a hand upon it in farewell. Then, "Promise you'll let the past rest. Don't chase echoes the way I did." His voice cracked on "don't," a hairline fracture that made the last tide in his eyes spill. I nodded, unable to speak. I clasped the caretaker's watch. Its glass felt neither solid nor liquid, but something liminal, a temperature that matched the bloodstream of thought rather than muscle. The instant my palm closed, the world inhaled. Sand, sea, stars, even. Marcus paused mid-breath. Light folded along unfamiliar seams, reordering geometry into a mandala that pivoted around the quartz stone and my heart. Colors swapped names. The boom of breakers bent into a canyon-deep silence that yet roared of its own echo. I sensed the loop's scar unfurling beneath my feet. Yards of invisible embroidery, each stitch a regret a branch trembling under its own frost. They tugged at me, demanding inventory, but the watch in my hand glowed warmer, warning me not to catalog, but to guard. Steward, not scholar. The mantra rooted itself, steadying me against fascination's lure. Time exhaled, motion resumed. Marcus blinked, gaze assessing for casualties in the landscape. Finding none, he took cautious steps toward the dune path. With every pace, the distance between us seemed to dilate beyond physics, as though the beach extended to accommodate the widening gulf of rolls. He paused where sand met marram grass and raised a hand. I mirrored the gesture, and though neither of us dared wave, too mundane, too finite, the greeting hung long enough to pass for blessing. The caretaker inclined her head, satisfied. She turned, cloak billowing. Wind picked up, tugging grains into shimmering spirals that chased her steps until she evaporated between them like smoke departing a broken lantern. The instant she vanished, dawn's bleeding edge arrived, a thin artery of coral diluting the night. I looked down at the quartz stone. Sea foam glazed its surface, leaving transient lace. In the watch's heart, the miniature tides calmed, establishing a rhythm that felt uncannily like my own pulse. I understood that every sunrise would now pass through this watch before touching the horizon, and each sunset would whisper back its testimonies. Custody, not prison. Possibly. From the track above, Marcus's silhouette diminished, liberated by gravity that no longer argued. I felt no urge to call him back. Release was the gift I could still give. The tide reversed, beginning its climb toward the stone. I tested the watch's chain. It unspooled endlessly, yet weighed almost nothing. I seated myself on damp sand, legs folded, cloakless against the breeze. The watch's glow paired with dawn's pallor, weaving a quiet lattice of light across my knees. I imagined future wanderers stumbling upon this beach, hearing nothing but gulls, never guessing a sentinel nested among rocks. Their ignorance would be my evidence of success. Behind me, the cottage would surrender to vines, the notebooks, ashes carried into soil, and the sinkhole's chains rust themselves into oblivion. Time would heal because it was my task to keep the bandage clean. The sun's rim breached the sea, flooding the watch with rose-gold fire. Some distant bell told the hour, exactly 6, and its echo arrived polished of all menace. I inhaled, tasting brine and possibility, then exhaled a single word to the empty air, sealing my vow. Stay. Grains warmed under my hands, the watch ticked forward with tranquil certainty, and somewhere far inland, Marcus's footsteps aligned with the future neither loop nor regret could ever seize again.